A History of Daggerfall by Odiva
Wood.
Yarwood. There is sufficient archaeological evidence for the modern historian to believe that there has been some variety of human settlement in the city-state of Daggerfall, starting at least 1,000 years before recorded history. The first use of the name Daggerfall to refer to the area around the current capital was most probably in the 246th year of the First Era. The first half of the Iliac Bay, in fact all of the current province of High Rock, was conquered by invading Nords who brought a rough sort of civilization with them. One of the first civilized acts the Nords performed was a census, the so-called Book of Life. Listed on page 933 of the book is this entry. North of the highest bluffs, south of the moors, west of the cliffs, and east of the sea is called Daggerfall. 110 men, 93 women, 13 children under the age of 8, 58 cows, 7 bulls, 63 chickens, 11 cocks, 38 hogs live here. Nearly 4,000 years after the census was taken, we can see that these 216 people have multiplied heartily. The last census, in the year 3E401, lists the population at over 110,000. It is always difficult to find an exact number, but the capital city of Daggerfall certainly outnumbers her rival Sentinel and Wayrest. It has been a consistent, if not actually helpful, amusement of historians to find the origin of place names. Daggerfall, by tradition, is said to refer to the night the first chieftain threw to form the borders of his lands, but there are other legends that may have equal validity. The Daggerfall entry from the Book of Life actually supports one theory about the reason for Daggerfall's longevity. The people were coastal fishermen, but they also found the land itself sufficiently rich to support raising livestock. This inclination of the early citizenry toward reinforcing their principal products brought stability to a fickle land. Daggerfall thrived during the years of the Skyrim occupancy. When the Wild Hunt killed King Boreas of Winterhold in the First Era of 369, the Northern lands engaged in the War of Succession in Skyrim greatly weakened, lost their holdings in High Rock and Morrowind. The Iliac Bay had become important strategically, and Daggerfall began to expand her military. There were multiple opportunities for her to exercise this army and navy during the Durrani conflicts with the force of the Elysian Order. The Durranis were native Britons, and Britons are hardly ever given to excessive religion. Daggerfall became a minor base of operations for the Durranis and their allies. Raven Durrani, the enchantress whose magic helped secure the final victory of the Elysians in the Glenumbra Moors, was one of the earliest occupants of Castle Daggerfall. Over the centuries that followed, the Durranis followed into obscurity, but Daggerfall continued her growth. In 1E609, King Thorgr of Daggerfall defeated the army of Glenpoint and became the prominent economic, cultural, military force in southern High Rock, a position the kingdom has precariously kept ever since. Ironically, it was another successful military exercise 370 years later that ended Daggerfall's monopoly of bay trade. The annihilation of the Orcish capital Orsinium by a joint effort of Daggerfall, the new kingdom of Sentinel, and the now extinct Order of Diagna. The scattering of the orcs from eastern High Rock made the river route to the bay more accessible. The tiny village of Wayrest grew like a flower that no longer feared the mow. In 20 years, Wayrest trade profits equaled Daggerfall's. In 40 years, Wayrest was the acknowledged master of Iliac Bay trade. In 120 years, Wayrest became the kingdom of Wayrest. The kingdom of Sentinel did not exhibit Wayrest's aggrandizement during the First Era. The Red Guards were warriors learning the ways of the merchants, and their land was enemy enough to keep their population checked. Indeed, the number of people in all areas of the Iliac Bay was halved once in the First Era by the Frisian Plague, once again by the War of Righteousness, and the third time by the invading Akaviri. If Daggerfall had not spent its first 1,000 years preparing for the battles of the next 1,000 years, it is indeed conceivable that the Iliac Bay today might be Akavirian. The Second Era, like the latter part of the First Era, is a tapestry of wars, insurrections, and plagues. Daggerfall, Sentinel, and Wayrest continue to expand and improve their military and economic positions in the bay. Daggerfall and Wayrest would transpose positions as major trading center of the bay and Daggerfall and Sentinel likewise bandied over which was the superior military power. The Iliac Bey has continued to hold an important position in the imperial government of the Third Era, rarely allies to the combined armies in opposition to the Camoran usurper in the Third Era of the Third Century. The Third Era is a notable exception, but not always enemies. Daggerfall, Sentinel, and Warrest have weathered the storms of contention, plague, famine, and pestilence. The recent War of Brittany was typical of Iliac Bey warfare, sincere, professionally violent, and peaceably resolved.